So we are back with another new video, and we're going to be looking at some more of the cut content for Fallout 4. Specifically, what we're going to be looking at is some things that actually are available in the game file, so we know it was cut and actually in the game at one point in one form or another. Many of these are very basic and rudimentary, not having textures or much else going on for them. While a few of the other things I'm going to be showing you were actually cut much earlier in the process, and we do have some concept art of them, so they were more in the idea stage and obviously in the artistry stage, but never actually got into the game. Either way, I actually feel like all of the things I'm about to show you look really cool. I went through quite a lot of the cut content, and this is kind of what I curated as the 5 most interesting pieces. And now I know, before some of you guys start yelling at me, I actually have made cut content videos in the past. I'll have a link to both of these at the end of this video, and I also show you some really cool pieces of cut content in those, and I'd actually say it's a great tandem piece to this, but I'm specifically not having any overlap between those videos and this one. Everything I show you today is totally unique, and I've never covered it on this channel before. And even beyond that, hey, maybe if you're a mod author looking for some inspiration, a lot of the stuff in this is really freaking cool, and I think all of us would collectively love to see it in Fallout 4. With all that being said though, we could just jump into the video. So the first one actually requires a little bit of a backstory. Supermutants are actually a pretty fundamental aspect of the Fallout universe. They've been in, I think, every single Fallout game as one of the major factions that you can't really interact with outside of just shooting them down. Well, the supermutants are a byproduct of this thing called the forced evolutionary virus. It was a virus that you could inject in different creatures as well as humans, and originally it was developed before the Great War in hopes of actually creating super soldiers. The goal was to create something very similar to the supermutants. Unfortunately, when they started testing it on humans, they realized, well, they're not very smart. So although supermutants are extremely strong and very tanky, so much so that it says in the lore they have an unlimited lifespan, they're not immortal, but natural causes will never take them away. Unfortunately, if you play through Fallout 4 or any of the other Fallouts, you'll quickly realize that supermutants actually aren't that smart, and that's one of the unfortunate byproducts of this serum. But seemingly inside of each and every supermutant is actually a totally normal human that was simply injected with this virus. It seems like at some point in Fallout 4 that was going to be a plot point, at least with the Brotherhood. There's a model in the game actually called BOS Supermutant Lab, so it seems like this could have been something you stumbled upon while exploring a lab in Fallout 4, and thus, it seems like it's kind of implied by this that the Brotherhood were somewhat successfully reversing the virus, as you could kind of tell by the human-like nature of this guy. He looks much less like a supermutant and more like a human. In addition, there's actually also a model of an FEV hound. This of course is just largely a mutant hound, but I imagine this would have actually been placed in that same lab as maybe a failed version of the virus, mainly because it's labeled as FEV. Obviously, a mutant hound doesn't really make much sense to be labeled as an FEV hound. If it was just a dead mutant hound to be in the background, it probably would be labeled as dead mutant hound. And beyond that, it kind of makes sense for the Brotherhood to be doing something like this. They do have a ton of technology, and even though most of the time they're only out for themselves, let's say one of the plot points was a Brotherhood soldier was actually infected with the FEV virus, and now they were trying to revert him and maybe experimenting on mutant hounds because they cared less. Either way, very interesting. I really wish it was in the game. I think that would have been something really cool, but I guess we just got the Institute instead. So speaking of supermutants, it actually seems like they as an enemy would have been significantly more interesting in Fallout 4 than they ended up being. So this is more in the concept art stages. It was never actually implemented into the game, but more or less what you're seeing here is a bunch of different armor prototypes for supermutants. The middle column there more or less has supermutants with a bunch of physiologically attached pieces of equipment. It seems like they are integrated into them. Imagine you're just exploring the wasteland and suddenly around a corner you find a high-level legendary supermutant with an integrated launcher on his shoulder. That would certainly make them a more scary faction and something that would definitely feel a little bit more formidable. That concept in general of integrated equipment I think sounds really freaking cool. I actually wish we got that on Power Armor. Almost like a hybrid between the robot DLC and power armor customization. But then we also do have a super mutant armor. It almost looks like a super mutant power armor, as well as 2 very big sabers that look very daunting. Like imagine each legendary super mutant you did encounter was this guy. That'd be awesome. I bet that would really drag you into the game and make them a significantly more interesting faction than what we actually have. I mean, right now, yeah, super mutants are pretty tough enemies, especially at some of the earlier levels, but they always have like pipe pistols. And at the end of the day, I actually find them to be be fairly easy to take down. But if I was running into something like this left and right, it definitely would be a different story. And also, I'm not really sure how this ties into everything else, but you also have that little robot dog with like a turret on its back. I don't know what that would be all about. Maybe this was intended as a plot line where maybe the Institute actually augmented these super mutants to use them for their own purpose, because I can't imagine these super mutants had the technology or know-how to actually create a fully robotic dog. It doesn't look biological at all. Either way, very interesting. Again, something that I would love to see through modding, but obviously this would be quite a difficult mod to create. So this one isn't as massive or crazy as some of the other ones, but there's actually texture files in Fallout 4 for a compound bow. I think this would have been really cool to see in the game, especially because of the overhauls to Fallout 4's combat system. Obviously, we do have some mods that add in bows and things like that, but all of them are fairly dated at this point and not really up to the same standards we have with other mods in that category that are releasing today. Fallout 4 as a whole is really shallow in the equipment department. I feel like they're relying way too much on customization options to really fulfill some of that. And although it's definitely cool, I love the customization of Fallout 4. Maybe having 4 or 5 more options as to things that are highly customizable, such as a compound bow, would have been really cool. I mean, imagine some of the different mods you can make to a compound bow, or maybe even something to make it an energy compound bow towards the later stages of the game. Again, one of the more minor ones on this list, but just something that I'm disappointed never actually got implemented. Alright, so I know this one in particular is going to disappoint a lot of people. There was actually going to be a different form of a Deathclaw, and this time it actually looks like it was going to be a radioactive Deathclaw, something that mutated through something. Maybe it was the FEV virus or something like that. But more or less what we're seeing is going to be a Deathclaw with a lot of his features removed here. He no longer has horns, his tail isn't nearly as sharp and spiky as it was previously, but also he has 3 arms and 3 legs. As well as I also feel like it's important to comment that his jaw is distinctively different. It's not as closed as a regular Deathclaw jaw. This is another instance where this would have been an awesome enemy. I can only imagine that this, or maybe even some variant of that Deathclaw, imagine you encounter a legendary Deathclaw. And you know, after you damage a legendary enemy in Fallout 4 to a certain degree, they actually mutate and gain back some of their health. What if instead of gaining back some of his health, that Deathclaw turned into this thing for whatever reason? I'm sure there's some type of lore or plot device they could add in to actually make that make sense, but either way, that would make legendary enemies way scarier and way more formidable. I know it's a sentence I'm saying a lot throughout this, but I just think there's a ton of cool uses for that. Let's say it's not legendary enemies, let's say it's just, yeah, somebody injected a Deathclaw with the FEV virus and this is what happened. Or just a radioactive Deathclaw. There's ghouls in the game, so maybe if a Deathclaw is spending too much time in radiation, it's going to turn into this thing. I think that would have been really freaking cool, and I would love to encounter this in game. Again, if there's any mod authors out there that want to create this, I feel like this is one of the coolest and most creatable things on this list outside of the compound bow. Alright, so then we got bugs, or a lot of things that were going to be a part of the bugs in Fallout 4 that were removed for whatever reason. So Fallout 4 was actually originally intended to have cockroaches. We actually have the model for these as well as some different animations of them moving. Based on some of these files, it actually seems like they were going to be around different heaps of garbage and even beyond that be edible. So you could potentially, I guess, look down, pick up one of these cockroaches, have it in your inventory, maybe cook it later, but of course just eat it. Now this is one that maybe I don't necessarily want or wish I had in the game, but it would have been an interesting concept nonetheless. The second one though is significantly cooler. More or less, legendary radroches were actually supposed to give birth or just have a bunch of smaller radroches on them. This is getting back to that same point I was kind of making before, that this would have been a significantly cooler way to make legendary enemies stand out from the rest of the pack. Right now, a legendary radroach just has more health than a regular radroach. With this feature, it would have been way different. There would have been other radroches spawning off of that thing, and you would have to deal with those in addition to the main one. Kind of similar to what is the Mirelurk Queen right now in Fallout 4. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, if you did, you could leave a comment, like, or even subscribe if you want to see some of my other uploads that hopefully should be out in the coming weeks. But of course, we do have a not psych fun fact, economics fun fact. So I recently had to read this paper for one of my economics classes, and it was pretty freaking interesting. And it more or less showed that TV shows cause changes in like people's behavior. I don't actually know how this is an economics paper, but I had to read it for an economics class either way. More or less what it actually was, it was looking at, in Brazil, I guess a lot of people watch soap operas. So it tracked when a certain company providing soap operas entered into a region. So like when one town didn't have access to a certain soap opera and then got access to it. And more or less it looked at the effect this had on fertility based on the characters on the show. So let's say the mom in the show only had 3 kids, where the national average at the time may have been 5 kids. What the show actually found was that as a result of this, fertility, or rather childbirth, went down about 10%. So after a certain region got access to these soap operas and actually watched them for a year, on average, a family had 10% less kids. And I thought that was pretty freaking shocking. Like, I wouldn't actually think of a TV show to have such a significant impact on our lives. And then there was another study of a similar vein actually looking at that TV show 16 and Pregnant. It's on MTV in the US, and it found that after that show came on air, teen pregnancies went down about 7% in the US. You might be thinking, oh, how do you know if it wasn't some outside or omitted variable or something like that, a third factor impacting that? And I'm not going to get into like the details of the article, but both of those studies actually did have controls for other things like time passage and just cultural change. Both were actually really well done and extremely detailed in controlling for some of those outside variables. So I guess the next question is, what impact am I having on all of you who are watching me right now? But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. As always, again, I thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.